Mantras of our Divine Mother. Our Divine Mother says, in a general way, my force is there, constantly at work, constantly shifting the psychological element of our being to put them in new relations and defining to yourself the different facets of your nature so that you may see what should be changed, developed, rejected. With always our love and blessings, says our Divine Mother. Sri Aurobindo's Savitri, Book 7, Canto 6, topic Nirvana and the discovery of the all-negating Absolute. Then from the heights, a greater voice came down. The word that touches the heart and finds the soul, the voice of light after the voice of night. O soul, bear not thy kingdom to the full, that all in thee may reach its absolute. God must be born on earth and be as man, that man, being human, may grow even as God. Cast off thy mind, step back from form and name, annul thyself that only God may be. Darshan Day Messages, 21st Feb 1952. Our Divine Mother says, make of us the hero warriors we aspire to become. May we fight successfully the great battle of the future that is to be born against the past that seeks to endure, so that the new things may manifest and we may be ready to receive them. Words of our Divine Mother, taken from the compilations of both our Divine Mother and our Lord Sri Aurobindo, book The Psychic Being, topic What is meant by the psychic being. Before that, words of our Lord about the psychic being. The psychic being is the human portion of the divine, a poetry. This bodily appearance is not all. The form deceives. The person is a mask. Hid deep in man, celestial powers can dwell. His fragile ship conveys through the sea of years an incognito of the imperishable. A spirit that is a flame of God abides a fiery portion of the wonderful, artist of his own beauty and delight, immortal in our mortal poverty. This sculpture of the forms of the infinite, this screened, unrecognized inhabitant, initiate of his own veiled mysteries, hides in a small dumb seed his cosmic thought. In the mute strength of the occult idea, determining predestined shape and act, passenger from life to life, from scale to scale, changing his imaged self from form to form, he regards the icon growing by his gaze, and in the worm foresees the coming God. Our Lord Aurobindo talks about the meaning of the psychic being. These are the words taken from Essays Divine and Human. And our Lord says, I mean by the psychic, the inmost soul being and the soul nature. This is not the sense in which the word is used in the ordinary parlance, or rather, if it is so used, it is with great vagueness and much imprison of the total true nature of the soul, and it is given a wide extension of meaning which carries it far beyond that province. All phenomena of an abnormal or supernormal, psychological or an occult character are dubbed psychic. If a man has a double personality, changing from one to another, if an apparition of a dying man, something of his mere vital sheath, or else a thought form of him appears and stalks through the room of his wandering friend, if a poltergeist kicks up an unseemly row in a house, all that is classed under psychic phenomenon and regarded as a fit object for psychic research, though these things have nothing whatever to do with the psychic. Again, much in yoga itself, that is merely occult, phenomenon of the unseen vital or mental or subtle physical beings, visions, symbols, all that mixed, often perturbed, often shadowy, often illusory range of experiences which belong to this intervening country between the soul and its superficial instruments, or rather to its outermost fringes. All the chaos of the intermediate zone is summed up as psychic and considered as an inferior and dubious province of spiritual discovery. Again, there is a constant confusion between the mentalized desire soul, which is a creation of the vital urge in man, of his life force seeking for its fulfillment, and the true soul, which is a spark of the divine fire, a portion of the divine. Because the soul, the psychic being, uses the mind and the vital as well as the body as instruments for growth and experience, it is itself looked at as if it were some amalgam or some subtle substratum of mind and life. But in integral yoga, if we accept all this chaotic mass or soul stuff or soul movement, we shall enter into a confusion without an issue. All that belongs only to the coverings of the soul. The soul itself is an inner divinity greater than mind or life or body. It is something that once it is realized from obscuration by its instruments at once creates a direct contact with the divine and with the self and the spirit, says our Lord Sri Aurobindo. Our Lord specifies about psychic being in the book Letters on Yoga Part 3 and says its role in sadhana and mentions what is meant in the terminology of the integral yoga by the psychic is the soul element in the nature, the pure psyche or divine nucleus which stands behind mind, life and body. It is not the ego, but of which we are only dimly aware. It is a portion of the divine and permanent from life to life, taking the experience of life through its outer instruments. As this experience grows, it manifests a developing psychic personality which insists always on the good, true, and beautiful, finally becomes ready and strong enough to turn the nature towards the divine. It can then come entirely forward, breaking through the mental, vital, and physical screen, govern the instincts, and transform the nature. Nature no longer imposes itself on the soul. Nature no longer imposes itself on the soul, but the soul, the Purusha, imposes its dictates on the nature. Our Lord says about psychic being in the book Letters on Yoga Part 1 and says, people do not understand what I mean by the psychic being because the word psychic has been used in English to mean anything of the inner, mental, vital, physical, or anything abnormal or occult, and even the more subtle moments of the outer being, all in a jumble. Also, occult phenomena are often called psychic. The distinction between these different parts of the being is unknown. Even in India, the old knowledge of Upanishads in which they were distinguished has been lost. The Jivatman, the psychic being, Purusha Antaratman, the Manomaya Purusha, the Pranamaya Purusha are all confused together. Our Lord says in the Letters of Yoga Part 1, the psychic part of us is something that comes direct from the divine. The psychic part of us is something that comes direct from the divine and is in touch with the divine. In its origin, it is the nucleus, pregnant with the divine possibilities, that supports this lower triple manifestation of mind, life, and body. There is this divine element in all living beings, but it stands hidden behind the ordinary consciousness, is not at first developed, and even when developed, is not always or often in the front. It expresses itself so far as the imperfection of the instruments allow, by their means and their limitations. Our Lord says it grows in the consciousness by Godward experience, gaining strength every time there is a higher moment in us, and finally by the accumulation of these deeper and higher moments, there is developed a psychic individuality, that which we call usually the psychic being. It is always this psychic being that is the real, though often the secret cause of man's turning to the spiritual life and his greater help in it. It is therefore that which we have to bring from behind to the front in the integral yoga. Our Lord says the word soul, as the word psychic, is used very vaguely and in many different senses in the English language. More often than in ordinary parlance, no clear distinction is made between mind and soul, and often there is even more serious confusion for the vital being of desire. The false soul or the desire soul is intended by the words soul and psychic, and not the true soul, the true psychic being. The psychic being is quite different from the mind or vital. It stands behind them, where they meet in the heart. Its central place is there, but behind the heart rather than in the heart, for what men call usually the heart is the seat of emotion, and human emotions are mental vital impulses, not ordinarily psychic in their nature. This mostly secret power behind, other than the mind and life and force, is the true soul, the psychic being in us. The power of the psychic, however, can act upon the mind, vital, and body, purifying thought and perception and emotion, which then becomes psychic feeling and sensation and action and everything else in us, and preparing them to be divine moments. The psychic being, says our Lord, may be described in different languages as the Purusha in the heart or Chaitya Purusha, but the inner or the secret heart must be understood. Hridaye Guhyam, not the outer, vital, emotional center. Our Lord says, ordinarily, all the more inward, all the abnormal psychological experiences are called psychic. The word psychic for the soul, as distinguished from mind and vital, all moments and experiences of the soul would in that sense be called psychic, those which rise from or directly touch the psychic being, where mind and vital predominate, the experience could be called psychological, surface, or occult. Our Lord says, the word soul has various meanings according to the context. It may mean the Purusha supporting the formation of Prakriti, which we call a being, though the proper word would rather be a becoming. It may mean, on the other hand, specifically the psychic being. In an evolutionary creature like man, it may mean the spark of the divine, which has been put into matter by the descent of the divine into the material world, which upholds all evolving formations here. There is and can be no psychic being in a non-evolutionary creature like the Asura. There can be none in a god who does not need one for his existence. But what the god has is a Purusha and a Prakriti or energy of nature of that Purusha. If any being of the typical worlds wants to evolve, he has to come down to earth, take the human body, and accept to share in the evolution. It is because they do not want to do this that the vital beings try to possess men so that they may enjoy the materialities of the physical life without having the burden of evolution or the process of conversion in which it culminates. Our Divine Mother says in question and answers of 1960 on 16th July, question, sweet mother, what exactly is the soul or the psychic being? What is meant by evolution of the psychic being? What is its relation to the Supreme? For this, our Divine Mother says, the soul and the psychic being are not exactly the same thing, although their essence is the same. The soul is the divine spark that dwells at the center of each being. It is identical with its divine origin. It is the divine in man. The psychic being is formed progressively around this divine center, the soul, in the course of its innumerable lives in the terrestrial evolution, until the time comes when the psychic being, fully formed and wholly awakened, becomes the conscious sheet of the soul around which it is formed. And thus identified with the divine, it becomes his perfect instrument in the world. Question, sweet mother, In the human being, is the psychic being the entire soul, or do both the soul in its essence as a divine spark in all creatures and the psychic being exist together? For this, our Divine Mother says, the soul is the eternal essence at the center of the psychic being. The soul is the eternal essence at the center of the psychic being. The soul is, in fact, like a divine spark which puts on many states of the being of increasing density down to the most material. It is inside the body, within the solar plexus. So to say, these states of being take form and develop, progress, become individualized, perfected in the course of many earthly lives and form the psychic being. When the psychic being is fully formed, it is aware of the consciousness of the soul and manifests it perfectly, says our Divine Mother. And are the soul and the psychic being one and the same thing? For this, our Divine Mother says that depends on the definition you give to the words. In most religions, perhaps in philosophies, it is the vital being which is called the soul. For it is said the soul leaves the body, while it is a vital being which leaves the body. One speaks of saving the soul, wicked souls, redeeming souls, but all that applies to the vital being. For the psychic being has no need to be saved, for it doesn't share the faults of the external person. It is free from all reactions. Our Divine Mother says, but all that implies to the vital being. For the psychic being has no need to be saved. It doesn't share the faults of the external person. It is free from all reactions. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo states in Letters on Yoga, a distinction has to be made between the soul in its essence and the psychic being. Behind each and all, there is the soul, which is the spark of the divine. None could exist without that. But it is quite possible to have a vital and physical being without clearly evolved psychic being behind it. Still, one cannot make general statements that no aboriginal has a soul or there is no display of the soul anywhere. The inner being is composed of the inner mental, vital, physical, but that is not the psychic being. The psychic is the innermost being and quite distinct from these. The word psychic indeed is to indicate anything that is deeper than the external mind, anything occult or supraphysical, but that is a use which brings confusion and error and entirely discarded when we speak or write about yoga. In ordinary parlance, we may sometimes use the word in a very popular sense or in poetry, which is not bound to the intellectual accuracy. The psychic being is wheeled by the surface movements and expresses itself as best as it can through these outer instruments, which are more governed by the outer forces than by the inner influences of the psychic. But that doesn't mean that they are entirely isolated from the soul. The soul is in the body in the same way as the mind or vital. But the body it occupies is not this gross physical frame only, but the subtle body also. When the gross sheath falls away, the vital mental sheaths of the body still remain as a soul's vehicle till these two dissolve. The soul of a plant or an animal is altogether dormant. Only its means of expression are less developed than those of the human beings. There is much that is psychic in the plant, much that is psychic in the animal. The plant has only the vital physical evolved in its form, so it cannot express itself. The animal has a vital mind and can by its consciousness, but is limited and its experiences are limited. So the psychic essence has a less developed consciousness and experience that is present, at least possible, in man. In all the same, animal has a soul, can respond very readily to the psychic in man. The ghost is, of course, not the soul. It is either the man appearing in his vital body or a fragment of this vital that is seized by some vital force or being. The vital part of us normally exists after the dissolution of the body for some time and passes away into the vital plane, where it remains till the vital sheath dissolves. Afterwards, it passes. It is, if it is mentally evolved in the mental sheath, to some mental world, and finally the psychic leaves its mental sheath and goes to its place of rest. If the mental is strongly developed, then the mental part of us can remain, so also can the vital, provided they are organized and centered round the true psychic being, for they then share the immortality of the psychic. Otherwise, the psychic draws mind life into itself, enters into an internatal quiescence, says our Lord Sri Aurobindo.